The alarms inside Pelican Bay State Prison were screaming so loud that even the guards froze. Inside the security housing unit, the SHU, America's most dangerous inmate, stood in the middle of his cell, breathing hard, eyes cold, and hands covered in blood. 3 guards were already on the floor. A 4th guard shouted, "His loose inside the tier." This inmate had spent 23 hours a day locked in a concrete box. No sunlight, no human contact, no mercy. But somehow he had escaped his restraints. And now, every man inside the SHU, guards and inmates, knew one truth. If he wasn't stopped right now, Pelican Bay was about to witness the deadliest incident in its history. The guard nearest to him whispered into his radio, "Unit Bravo, we've lost control of him, again." But what happened next would shock even the toughest officers in the entire prison system, because this wasn't the first time he broke the rules of Pelican Bay. It was a moment the world finally realized Pelican Bay couldn't break him. But who was this man? And what could push one inmate to become the most feared prison in America? To understand how things reached that breaking point inside Pelican Bay, we need to go back years earlier, before the blood, before the alarms, before the entire prison whispered his name like a warning. Because once, he was just a teenager growing up in a broken neighborhood, where violence wasn't a choice, it was a language everybody spoke. He joined a street gang before he was old enough to drive. He carried a gun before he learned how to pay bills. And by the time he turned 18, he already had a reputation for doing things other gang members were too scared to do. His rise into the gang world was fast, almost too fast. And one night, during a fight that spun out of control, everything changed. He was arrested, charged, convicted, and sentenced to a place designed only for the worst of the worst. Pelican Bay. At first, he didn't understand why everyone stared at him when he arrived. He was young, small compared to the older inmates. He wasn't the monster they expected. But Pelican Bay changes people, and it changed him fast. The SHU, Security Housing Unit, is not a regular prison block. It's a place where men are buried alive while still breathing. Inside, he learned the rules. No speaking, no touching, no looking at guards the wrong way, no mistakes. But the problem was, this inmate refused to obey. He didn't talk back. He didn't scream. He didn't fight in the open. He did something far worse. He stayed calm, too calm. The older inmates began to notice. The guards began to worry. Even the gang leaders outside the prison started hearing rumors about the quiet kid who never bent to Pelican Bay pressure. Then one night, the tension reached a boiling point. A guard entered his cell for a routine search, something that happened all the time. But this time, something went wrong. Very wrong. When the door opened, the inmate didn't move. He didn't blink. He just whispered, "Don't touch my stuff." The guard ignored him, and the next moment, everything exploded. With a speed nobody expected, the inmate lunged forward and tackled the guard to the floor. The alarm smashed through the block as officers rushed in. Inmates yelled through their cell doors. Guards ran for backup. The entire SHU was shaking with panic. And standing in the center of the chaos, covered in sweat, breathing like a wild animal, was the young man who would soon become America's most dangerous inmate. But this was only the first time he attacked. And the next attack would be far worse. The attack on the guard should have ended his story right there. Most inmates who lay a hand on an officer are taken down instantly, sometimes within seconds. But this time, he didn't go down. When the responding guard tried to drag him off the officer, he didn't fight like a normal man. He fought like someone who had been holding everything inside for years. 4 guards grabbed him, then 5, then 6. And still, he kept pushing forward. His eyes didn't blink. His voice didn't crack. He didn't scream like most inmates in panic. He whispered, "I told him not to touch my things." The guards finally slammed him against the floor, cuffed him, chained his legs, and strapped him to a restraint board. But even while tied down, he didn't stop staring at them. One guard later said he had never seen eyes like that. Empty, calm, and dangerous at the same time. But the question still hung in the air. How did this kid turn into a man Pelican Bay couldn't control? After the first attack, they punished him the only way Pelican Bay knew how. Total isolation. No yard time. No phone calls. No outside mail. No human voice except God shouting orders. Most inmates break after a few weeks. But he didn't. He sat in his cell, silent. He ate in silence. He slept in silence. And when guards walked by his cell door, he didn't react. Not a look. Not a word. Nothing. Some officers thought he was planning something. Others thought he was shutting down emotionally. But one sergeant had a different theory. He said, "That kid isn't breaking. He's waiting." Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, things went back to normal inside the SHU, or so everyone thought. One morning, a guard pushed breakfast through the food slot. It was supposed to be a normal moment, a simple meal. But the guard noticed something strange. The inmate had arranged his cell perfectly. Bed folded, floor spotless, walls wiped clean. Everything placed carefully like he was expecting company. No other SHU inmate did that. The guard asked, "Why is your cell so clean?" The inmate simply answered, "Because order keeps me ready." That sentence spread through the guards like a warning sign. Something about the way he said "ready" made them uneasy, but they had no idea what he was getting ready for. It happened on a quiet afternoon. No yelling, no fights, no warnings. A guard opened his cell door to cuff him for a medical check. Routine, safe, normal. But the moment the door clicked open, the inmate moved. Fast, too fast. He twisted the guard's wrist, grabbed his radio, and shoved him into the wall so hard the sound echoed down the tier. The alarm exploded. Red lights flashed again. Every guard on duty ran toward his cell. And standing there, holding the guard's radio in his hand, breathing slowly like he had all the time in the world, was the same inmate Pelican Bay thought they had broken. But this time, it wasn't just an attack. It was a message, and the whole prison was about to find out what that message meant. When the guards reached his cell, they expected chaos. They expected a fight, screaming, maybe even blood. But instead, they found something worse. The inmate wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't even trying to escape. He simply stood there, holding the guard's radio like it belonged to him. Then he raised it slowly to his mouth and whispered into it, "You're not listening." Every guard froze. Even the captain didn't dare step forward, because this wasn't just a violent outburst. This was communication. The inmate was trying to send a message, but nobody knew who the message was for. And before anyone could respond, he dropped the radio on the floor, placed his hand behind his back, and waited, like he knew exactly what would happen next. After the breakout attempt, everything went into lockdown. Doors slammed shut, lights dimmed, guards walked the tier with shields and pepper spray drawn. Every inmate in the SHU heard the alarms and knew something big had happened. Some whispered that he attacked again. Others said he was trying to escape for real. But the truth was stranger. When they moved him to a holding cage, he didn't speak, didn't look around, didn't resist. He just sat on the cold metal bench, staring through the bars like he was studying the prison itself. A lieutenant approached him. "Why did you do that?" he asked. The inmate blinked once. He didn't listen. Listen to what? He didn't answer. The lieutenant walked away, spooked, because it was clear this inmate wasn't acting out randomly. He was following a plan none of them understood. Over the next few days, the guards began noticing something unusual. Every attack he carried out had something in common. It only happened when someone touched his property, his bunk, his food tray, his cell items. It didn't matter what it was. If someone moved anything without permission, he reacted instantly. Some officers thought it was paranoia. Others thought it was trauma from his childhood. But one psychiatrist said something different. She said he wasn't being irrational. She said, he's creating control in a place where he has none. That made the guards nervous, because a man who can't be controlled is a man who becomes dangerous the moment he learns how to create control on his own. And inside a place like Pelican Bay, control is everything. It happened during a routine check. A guard slid open the metal slot in his door to look inside the cell. At first, everything looked normal. The bunk was clean, the floor spotless, nothing out of place. But then he saw it. A single sentence scratched into the concrete wall. No pencil, no pen, carved with something sharp. The message read, "Next time, I won't wait." The guard stepped back, heart racing, because there was only one question left. What wasn't he going to wait for? And whatever the answer was, Pelican Bay was about to find out. The morning after the carved message was found, the guards approached his cell carefully. No one wanted to be the first to open that door. But when they slid the metal slot open to check on him, they froze. The inmate was standing in the center of the cell, arms by his sides, staring straight at the door like he had been waiting for them. And then it happened. Every single light in the SHU, the most secure unit in all of Pelican Bay State Prison, flickered once, twice, and then the entire block went completely dark. No lights, no alarms, no cameras, just blackness, a blackout, inside the most dangerous part of the most dangerous prison in America. The guards panicked. Inmates screamed from inside their cells, and for several long seconds, no one could see where he was, or what he was doing. When the backup generators kicked on, the first thing the guard saw was the inmate, standing closer to the door than he had been before. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched them. And for the first time, the guards truly felt it. He wasn't afraid of them. They were afraid of him. Right after the blackout, the prison launched a full internal investigation. Electricians checked the wires. Technicians inspected the security system. Supervisors replayed camera footage from before the power dropped. But they found nothing that explained how the SHU lost power. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was cut. Nothing was tampered with. The warden himself, furious and confused, demanded answers. How does the most secure unit in the entire prison lose power for 10 seconds? Nobody could explain it. But one thing bothered them more. The blackout happened at the exact moment guards stopped in front of the inmate cell. Almost like he expected it. 3 days later, a prison psychologist came to speak with him. She sat outside his cell with a clipboard in her lap. She tried to start calmly. "I want to understand why you wrote that message on the wall." He didn't answer. She tried again, softer this time. "What is it you're not going to wait for?" Still nothing. But then, after nearly a full minute of silence, he looked at her for the very first time. His voice was low and calm. People only listen when they are scared. She stopped writing. "Are you trying to scare the prison?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I'm trying to warn it." That single sentence changed everything, because warnings always mean something is coming. Later that night, a guard walked past his cell and noticed something odd. A small, thin metal strip was lying on the floor near the vent, something that definitely didn't belong there. Alarmed, the guard knelt down and shined his flashlight into the vent, and what he saw inside made him stumble backward. Hidden deep in the metal grate, wedged between the bolts, was a sharp piece of steel. A weapon no inmate in the SHU should ever have. And the worst part? The vent led directly into the A system that connected multiple cells together, meaning one terrifying thing. He wasn't planning alone. The guard hit the emergency button instantly, because this wasn't just a warning anymore. This was a signal, and something, or someone, inside the SHU was preparing for the next move. Chapter 5, The Secret Network. The moment the guard found the weapon in the vent, the entire SHU went into a panic lockdown. But the real shock came minutes later. When officers opened the vent panel fully, they discovered something hidden behind it, something far more terrifying than just a single piece of metal. Inside the darkness of the vent, running across the metal walls, were dozens of small scratches. Not random scratches. Marks, signals, codes. Someone had been communicating through the vents. Not with sound, not with talking. With scratched messages passed through the A-flow system that connected each cell. This meant one thing. He wasn't just planning with someone. He was leading them. When they told the warden, his face went pale. Because if an inmate inside the SHU had built a communication network under their noses, there was no telling what he was planning next. Subchapter, The Silent Conversations. Hours after the discovery, guards started inspecting vents in other nearby cells. The pattern repeated everywhere. Short lines, long lines, tiny symbols scratched into metal. The inmates denied knowing anything. Some shrugged. Some pretended not to see. But one older inmate whispered through the food slot, "You think he's crazy?" "No, he's patient." The guard demanded answers, but the older inmate backed away, refusing to say more. Even the inmates were scared of him, which said everything, because inside the SHU, fear is a language everyone understands. Subchapter: The Search for the Tool. The prison launched a massive search for how he carved the messages. They searched his entire cell. The mattress, the toilet fixtures, the bed frame, the books, every inch of the concrete. Nothing. No tool. No sharp object. No metal piece missing. It was like the weapon appeared out of thin air. But one rookie guard made an observation everyone else missed. He said, "What if the message wasn't carved from the inside? What if it was passed to him from the vents themselves?" Meaning someone else in the SHU, someone with access to metal, could be supplying him tools. Someone working with him. Oh, working for him. That possibility changed everything. Because now they weren't dealing with one dangerous inmate. They were dealing with a system, a structure, a plan. Chapter 5, Ending Extreme Event. The Midnight Knock. At 2:14 a.m., long after the SHU went quiet, one guard walked past his cell. As he moved, he heard something that made him freeze in place. A sound coming from inside the vent. Tap, 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 tap. A coded message. He stepped closer, terrified. Then, suddenly, a shadow moved inside the cell. The inmate stood up from his bunk and walked to the door. He stopped just inches away from the small window, staring directly at the guard. Then he whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "It's starting." The guard stumbled backward, because whatever it wasn't going to be small, and it wasn't going to be quiet. Something inside the SHU was waking up. The morning after the midnight knock, the guards at Pelican Bay State Prison were on edge. Nobody slept well. Everyone kept replaying the same thing in their mind. Tap, 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 tap. But the real shock hit during the first shift change. A lieutenant walked past the inmate's cell and spotted something new on the floor. A folded piece of toilet paper. Perfectly square. Perfectly placed in the center of the cell. He opened the slot and ordered the inmate to step back. When he reached in and picked up the paper, he felt his hands shake, because inside the fold was a message written in tiny, scratched lines, almost invisible. A sequence of marks. Short, long, short, short. The lieutenant's heart dropped. It was the same pattern they heard in the vent the night before, meaning somehow he was passing messages out of a sealed SHU cell where no paper, no pen, and no tools were allowed. This wasn't chaos anymore. This was intelligence. Careful, precise, organized, and it meant something big was coming. The prison called in their internal intelligence team. 3 officers and 1 analyst crowded around a metal table studying the tiny scratches. They worked for hours. At first, they thought it was Morse code. Then they thought it was some kind of gang symbol language. But after comparing the scratches to the vent markings, the analyst leaned back in his chair with a stunned expression. "It's a map," he whispered. Everyone stared. "A map of what?" the sergeant asked. The analyst swallowed hard. "A map of the SHU. The vents. The airflow system. Every path." The room went silent, because if the inmate had built a map of the SHU ventilation system, then he knew more about the prison's blind spots than the guards did, which meant he could move information anywhere, and maybe even something worse. A rumor began spreading among the staff. Nobody knew who started it. Nobody could prove it. But the rumor said someone inside the prison staff was helping him. Some guards laughed it off. Others got nervous. Because how else would he get paper? How else would he pass messages? How else would he understand a ventilation system only engineers were supposed to know? One rookie officer whispered, "What if he didn't get help from a guard? What if he got help from an inmate worker? Someone allowed in areas others weren't." It wasn't a crazy idea. Laundry workers, kitchen workers, maintenance helpers. The SHU wasn't supposed to connect with them at all. But sometimes mistakes happened. Sometimes doors opened. Sometimes vents overlapped. Sometimes one wrong moment changed everything. The possibility scared everyone, because if he had a helper out there, it meant the problem wasn't trapped behind steel bars anymore. It was spreading. That night, during another sweep, a sergeant stopped at his cell and noticed something taped to the inside of the tiny window. He frowned, stepped closer, and felt his stomach twist. On the glass was a perfect drawing, scratched with something sharp, of the entire SHU floor plan. Every hole, every cell, every officer checkpoint, every camera position, perfectly detailed, perfectly accurate, and directly under the map was a single scratch sentence. You can't stop what you can't see. The sergeant backed away fast, because now they knew for sure. This wasn't random. This wasn't luck. This wasn't madness. This was strategy, and the most dangerous inmate in America had a plan the guard still didn't understand. But he clearly did. It happened on a cold morning, the kind where the air feels heavy before anything even happens. He was sitting in his cell, quietly reading, when the sound hit. Boom! The whole tish shook like the building had been punched by a giant. Shouts, running boots, emergency alarms. Something big was happening, something that would drag him into the center whether he wanted it or not. And then the door rolled open. A guard stood there. You. Step out. Warden wants you. His stomach tightened. When the warden calls you directly, it's never about something small. Never. And as he walked down that long hallway, he kept wondering one thing. Is this the day everything finally catches up to me? The warden's office in Pelican Bay State Prison feels colder than any cell in the whole facility. The man behind the desk stared at him with a face that didn't show emotion. Not anger, not fear, not even interest. Just a blank mask. Finally, the warden spoke. You've been here a long time, longer than most survive. And what happened last week didn't go unnoticed. The last week he meant was a hallway confrontation, the one he diffused without spilling a drop of blood. For the first time in his life, choosing peace actually changed something. You've proven you're not the man you used to be, the warden said, which is why I'm offering you something rare. He paused. Freedom? Transfer? A new position? He didn't know. Then the warden leaned forward. We're reviewing your case for step down. If it goes through, you'll walk out of the SHU permanently. His heart stopped for a moment. The SHU had been his world for years. He never imagined leaving it alive. But the warden wasn't finished. Don't celebrate. This is not guaranteed. You'll be watched closely. One mistake, one wrong move, everything disappears. When they escorted him back to the unit, inmates were whispering, some angry, some confused, some proud. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. Inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. But hope is dangerous inside Pelican Bay. It can be taken from you in a second. As he returned to his cell, he kept replaying the warden's words. Your life can change if you don't throw it away. Days passed, then a week, then another. Finally, on a quiet afternoon, his door rolled again. This time a lieutenant stood there, serious, unreadable. It's time. He stepped out. They led him down the long hallway, past the steel doors he thought would always be his home, past the wall that once took everything from him, past the demons he had fought alone in the dark. Then they stopped at one final barrier, a heavy steel door with a small red light. The lieutenant typed a code. The light turned green. The lock clicked, and the door opened, not to freedom, not yet, but to something he hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. Sunlight, real sunlight, warm, bright, alive. He stepped forward, slow, almost afraid. For the first time, Pelican Bay wasn't a cage. It was a doorway to whatever came next. And as the sunlight hit his face, he finally understood. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of the man he chose to become.